Today on Art of Supply, I'm joined by Ken Rutsky. Ken is the Chief Marketing Officer at Aryaka, and he's actually here to tell us about some of the findings from a recent report that they've done, looking into network security trends in transportation and logistics. So, hi, Ken. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Hey, it's great to be there here, Kelly, and I hope you're having a great day.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into this report, which I think is really interesting, right? Network security, data security, cybersecurity, all of that is top of mind for people. But let us get to know you a little bit better. What do you think
Sure.
it's helpful for people to know about your background?
Well, I've been around the block a few times, and I've run some marketing teams at both networking and security companies, and we're really kind of in the combination of networking and security with SASE or Secure Access Service Edge. And I've been doing this for a while. I've been at Aryaka for about a year and a half now. Prior to that, I was an independent consultant, and so I've looked at a lot of data over the years. And yeah, in my spare time, I like to get on my bicycle and go for long rides. And uh, in my spare business time, I'm constantly experimenting with AI right now and doing cool stuff. So that's
You and
that's the
everybody else.
requisite mention of
Yeah.
AI in the first 5 minutes of the
I got to get a
podcast.
bell to ring. From now on, we need to feel like, okay, we've officially rung the bell. But it's interesting you bring up AI because I think AI and network security have something in common. And that's it. It's not like if you study all there is to study, you know everything for more than 15 or 20 minutes. It's like a constantly moving target.
Yeah.
Given that so much is shifting in both of these areas, but certainly with a focus on network security, how do you keep yourself and how does your team keep themselves up to speed?
I think our number one thing is to talk to our clients and understand what their concerns are and what they need, and educate ourselves around how to solve those problems, because at the end of the day, we're here to solve customer problems. And so as a little bit of a segue to the survey, one of the reasons we do these surveys is also to educate ourselves, to
Yeah.
confirm that what we're working on matters to customers. And we did find that in this survey, even on the AI aspect of it, not to
Okay.
over index on AI here, but the one of the changes that's happening in the network today is AI traffic. And
Okay.
for us, it's just another type of traffic that we need to worry about performance, observability, and security of that traffic. So whether it's AI traffic, SaaS traffic,
Yeah.
cloud traffic, internal application traffic, it's another thing to worry about performance and security for.
Yeah. Now we're going to be learning a lot about what you discovered through this survey, but to give us a little bit of context, who were the target participants for this research effort?
We targeted C-level executives in the transportation and logistics industry in North America. And so those included directors, operational managers, C-level execs. So it was a broad path of that, primarily, though, not what you would call operators, right? So it's the people who are more
Yeah.
in tune with the decisions that are being made and the challenges being faced than the people doing the real hard work, who we love, which are the operators who are actually getting stuff done. So we talk to the people who are making decisions about strategy and technology in the transportation logistics industry and across both networking and security titles.
Yeah. Is this a report that you've been running, or is this a sort of either a new topic or a new group that you're surveying?
Yeah, so we did this report about 6 months ago to the manufacturing industry.
Okay.
Prior to that, Aryaka, and this is predates me, have been doing what we call a secure network transformation report, which was cross industry. We decided to focus more on industry views of this. And so this is our second industry view, which is transportation and logistics. And the next one we're going to do is, I know also some of your audience might be interested in this, is more around wholesale, retail, and
Yep.
e-tail. So we did manufacturing. Now we're transportation and logistics. I guess we're moving from the source to the consumer.
Right through the supply chain. So
Yeah.
certainly we're going to talk about a lot of sort of digital implications, but one of the things that I think makes the logistics space so interesting, but certainly also makes it more complicated, is the fact that yes, you have all of these digital platforms, but you also have a lot of physical assets, and not physical assets that hold still. I mean, depending on
Right.
who you are from a transportation standpoint, you may have moving pieces going all over the country, all over the world. How does that combination of physical assets and digital platforms affect the network security of these transportation providers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just adds another layer of complexity to the two main areas, right? The three areas we think about. From a performance perspective, I've got to worry about, since I'm so dependent on the digital data, even from those moving users and assets, right? They can be anywhere needing to
Yeah.
either send data or access an application. So those paths from, the wireless that you might use in a truck, for example, which we don't do, by the way. But once it gets to that network and it needs to transfer between maybe the
Yeah.
distribution center and the headquarters, that's a very complex path, and you have to worry about performance on all those areas. And then I think the second thing is the security. So there's more security risk, obviously. And so we think about, our mission is to help organizations, any user, any application, anywhere, with performance and availability and
Yeah.
security. So that's kind of more complicated when people and things are moving around.
Right. And I'm going to date myself here, Ken, but I remember working a job back in the day where not only did I go into the office and I actually had a desk, but that desk had a phone on it. And that phone had like an inside calling functionality and an
That's right.
outside
Yep.
calling. I know this is like, and then we banged two rocks together and made fire. But back in the day, your network was relatively facility contained.
That's
Maybe
right.
if you were a massive company, you'd have like a compound or a campus with 5 buildings and they were all on a
Yep.
network,
Yep.
right? But now we've got remote devices, we've got trucks moving around, we might
Yep.
have trailers that don't have a trucks attached to them. Has the concept of networking and what a network means changed, especially from a security standpoint, given that you can't really draw a line on a map and surround your network anymore?
Yeah, I mean, this is a long-standing discussion within the networking and security industry. Is there a perimeter? And I think the reality is the perimeter still exists because it's a data and logical perimeter, but
Okay.
it doesn't exist anymore as a physical perimeter, right? So you can't like expect to have, for example, a firewall sitting in a truck, right? But when that user wants to access a corporate application, you can now push them through a network infrastructure that includes
Okay.
enforcement of networking and security policy. And that's one of the things we do. And a lot of our other vendors in the market, I think we do it kind of uniquely, but I'm not here really to talk about that. But if you think about like, if I'm let's say I'm a distribution manager and I'm going out on a truck and I'm on my mobile phone and I want to access a corporate application,
Sure.
not the one at my uh, distribution center, I want to look, the organization wants me to have the same security applied, even though I'm doing it in a truck on a phone.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we allow that remote user to get secure access and have that same policy. So the network, right, this boundaryless network,
Yeah.
still knows how to apply policy. And I think one of the challenges we heard in the survey was the complexity of all this movement, and networking makes the job even more challenging
Yeah.
for these professionals. So when we look at the professionals we surveyed in in transportation and logistics versus in manufacturing, transportation, really, those respondents put much more emphasis, no surprise, on mobility and remote
Right.
access.
Yeah. No, I actually think that's a good transition to start digging into some of the specific things that you heard in the research. Even talking about supply chain with a background in procurement, I instantly, little bells go off when I start to hear things about cost. And
Yeah.
you very understandably started by asking about top priorities. So what you heard is that simplifying and reducing the cost of network operations was the top priority, but that makes me think, ooh, that's going to be expensive, right? Can you reduce complexity and reduce cost without having risk sort of pop out the other side and become an issue?
Yeah, that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? Or the $64 billion question,
These
maybe.
days.
Uh, the answer is yes, if you do it smart. And so, for example, one of the things, that we always talk about, and I believe there's some information in the survey, is the value of converging networking and security. And one of the
Mm,
ways you can become more operationally efficient is to have a single infrastructure. And so if you converge the networking with the network security, you can consolidate vendors, you can eliminate products. And every time you do that, you remove complexity from your operations. And at the same time, uh, if you have the right kind of strategy, you can actually get to better, consistent policy enforcement. Because one of the problems with these complex networks and complex network security stacks is policy meaning this is what you can do or can't do,
okay.
or this is applications that get priority on the network over these. It becomes inconsistently deployed over the organization. And that even happens for smaller organizations. Many of our customers are, maybe a smaller, you know, organization, which might be a regional transportation company with, you know, 10 or 15 locations,
Sure.
as opposed to a national one with hundreds or thousands, or an international one even. And even at that scale of 10 to 12, how do I get consistent policy? Because I might only have one person running that
Right.
entire infrastructure, right? So it's quite challenging. And so we weren't surprised to see, reducing the cost as a key driver, especially in today's economy. And then, it became about getting better performance, better security, better visibility after that.
Yeah. And that certainly ties because over 80% of the respondents, it's amazing these days when you can get more than half of people to agree to anything, but over 80% of people told you that their top challenge was staying on top of network security threats. So clearly this is a huge area of focus. What are some of the forms or examples of the types of network security risk or threats that they're looking at?
This has really evolved over the years. I think today the primary threat are the user borne things like Trojans and remote access Trojans, as well as uh, ransomware. And so, one of the things that we've noticed is uh, the if you would have done this survey 5 years ago, I doubt that you'd get this answer. In fact, I think network security threats would probably be in the below 50%, would be my
Okay.
prediction. Of course, who can know? So I can say that and be right
There's
or
no one to
wrong, and
challenge you.
nobody knows. But what's happened is, 5 or 10 years ago, the hackers and the people who were doing malicious things were attacking the high value targets like banking, like healthcare, and so the big investments and the big concern were in those industries that were targeted. But
Yeah.
what we've seen is now we have, people who are trying to disrupt supply chains, right? And they don't care where
Mhm.
they disrupt it because
Yeah.
they just want to disrupt it, or they want to get money from you with ransomware. And transportation logistic companies have money. And if you
Yeah.
say, I'm going to shut the network down if you don't do this, it's a really tough spot to be in because we're also dependent on the network. So the net of it is every industry, every segment now, transportation logistics included, has to be highly concerned about network security threats,
Mhm.
much more so than, even 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things that stood out to me, so we've talked a lot about network security, we've talked about AI, right? We've talked about sort of the progressive and ever evolving nature of these challenges, but workforce challenges also seem to be a huge source of concern now. Like, for instance, the number three challenge was this idea of trying to do more with less
Yeah.
because teams are either understaffed or people are undertrained. And then the third priority is trying to lessen the workload, therefore, on the people that you do have working on these network and security teams. It's interesting in a time where
Right.
AI is starting to come in and challenge for jobs that we're worried about shortage of people. How do you see all of these pieces coming together in terms of bringing in automation and AI versus trying to get in additional people and train up the people that these companies have?
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is here's the first reality is we've got to run the business and we've got to manage costs. Now I take that and I say, okay, but my networks become more complex. I have more places to worry about performance and security, and yet I can't grow my team. And
Yeah.
so the only way to fix that is by leveraging technology, whether that's consolidating vendors and getting a single view of everything, or leveraging AI to do better detection of problems earlier so that my small team, because everyone has a small team, it's just relative. Yeah,
True. Even
right.
if it's a
Like
huge team, it's still a
I
small
don't
team.
think I mean, other than a few like very high-end banks and
Yeah.
people like that, I don't think I've met a customer who says, well, we don't have enough for our security people to do, or our networking team is like
Yeah.
overstaffed, right? So, if you're 1,000-person organization, you might have two or three people in networking and network security. If you're a 10,000-person organization, you might have 30, but you know what? You got 10 times as much work.
Yeah.
And so, one of the other trends we see, and we heard this a little bit in this survey, though we've seen it in other work that we've done, is bringing these teams not just technology together, but organizationally together, so that they have a common vision, a common platform of work and
Yeah.
workflow, and a common investment in tools. And so we see that happening also. And I think that will also reduce complexity
Yeah.
and reduce costs because you're going to have less, finger pointing and less throwing stuff over the wall.
Absolutely. Now, this next question I want to ask you about, we may have gotten close to this earlier when you were talking about sort of the idea of a perimeter. But one of the
Right,
concepts that you introduce in the report coming from the survey is this idea of edge security. What
right.
exactly is edge security?
So edge security is, if you think of a network, at the logical level, I'm going to enter the network at some point, or I'm in the network and I'm going to leave the network. So there's this edge where I move from, say, you know, uh, artist supplies network to Amazon. That's an
Okay.
edge, right? I move from the Amazon cloud to Salesforce. That's another edge. So there's not just one edge. There's a lot of edges where I move domains and I move infrastructure. So when we think of edge security, we think about traffic making the round trip from what we call this will be familiar to some of your listeners, the first mile to the last mile,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yep.
So the first mile is, where is that asset? Where is that application? Then I've got the middle mile, or that broad network of transport. And then we've got the last mile getting to the user, right? So the user starts, it goes like this, it goes like this, and it's making its way across edges as it goes, especially in today's hybrid environment.
Yeah.
And one of the things the survey told us, and I'm going to look because I don't remember the exact numbers, is that more than half, it was 53%, of the respondents are in the process of moving legacy applications to the cloud. And
Okay.
what that means is it moves the edge. Now I've got an edge in the cloud where users are coming in and out of an application, sitting in an Oracle cloud or a Microsoft Azure or a Google cloud or an Amazon cloud. And that's 53%. Another 17%,
Mm.
they're not sure. And the reality is we live in a hybrid world. 74% of the respondents said that they have a mix of both cloud and private data center environments. Only 13% were cloud only. And my guess is those are the newer
Yeah. Lighter.
organizations,
Yeah.
and they're probably the smaller ones too.
Yeah. Now, one piece of this, Ken, I want to say back to you because I think this is interesting if I've got it right, but you feel free to correct me if I'm not thinking about it the
Yeah,
right way. So, we've kind of talked about two different concepts of edge or perimeter. One is you have the driver in the truck on his mobile device who wants to
right.
access something within the secure network, right? So, he's geographically far
That's
away
right.
and he wants to be from a data standpoint inside the system. But then we talk about this idea of edge security, and we're talking about different kinds of systems. So that makes me think there's a different kind of conceptual edge. Every time you've integrated two things or multiple things on some kind of BI layer or whatever, are they both sort of like different concepts about what the edge of a network or a series of
Yeah.
applications are like? Because I think there would be different risks in both of those
So
situations.
we think of the wide area network being like the total of all your assets, whether it's your people or your branch locations or your headquarter locations.
Okay.
And then that wide area network connects to the cloud and it might connect to applications in the cloud. So I need a different type of security between my wide area network and the cloud, but I want to keep consistent enforcement as I go back and forth. And so that's another kind of edge. So
Yeah.
there's people doing remote access, and then there's application flow that trans uh, moves across these borders between infrastructure types.
Yeah.
Now, that's an interesting thing with AI because now what you're seeing is things like GPU, which is the processing unit of AI, GPU as a service. And so GPUs, this is why NVIDIA is worth a gazillion dollars now, right? Is GPUs are super expensive. They're
Yeah.
in constrained supply. And so, what a lot of organizations are doing is they're going to implement their first AI effort on a GPU as a service that's hosted
Okay.
somewhere. Because again, it could be Amazon, it could be some of these newer players in GPU as a service. Well, that's a new type of movement. And so you need now what's the AI security that sits there? And that's something
Right.
that we're working on right now is what does an AI, essentially firewall look like that's really focused on AI specific threats. And there's a lot of activity in that space, just even understanding what those threats are. And we'll be putting products out so that we have an infrastructure at that edge, like we do with
Mm.
the cloud, like we do with the data center, like we do with other resources. So we'll also have an edge capability within an AI infrastructure.
So it's not getting simpler, is what you're saying.
Well, that's our mission, right? Yeah, we are making it simpler for our customers.
Yeah.
The problem is getting more complex, but the amount of technology that you can apply to it if you do it smart is actually simplifying operations for some organizations.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do is in a large part, we do a lot of managed service delivery, which means we take that off of the operational people in the organization. So those, three networking and security people in the
Sure.
1,000-person organization, they can do higher value work and we do the dirty work, right? Or the management of keeping the operation live, keeping the policy consistent so that they can deal with things like threats, with things like, expansion of the organization and architecting the network for the next generation of AI applications. And so
Yeah.
we free them up to do the more value add work that humans are going to be doing for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, Ken, this is where it gets really hard. So, what I'm going to tell you before I ask you this last question is I promise not to hold your answer to being right. Okay.
Okay.
This is a
Okay.
best effort, do your best kind of thing. We talked about the fact that this was the first time you ran this report for transportation and logistics.
Right.
We've also talked about how much things are changing in this space so quickly. If we were to look ahead to a hypothetical second annual running of this report, do you have any guesses about the areas where we're most likely to see change or where things maybe wouldn't change so much because we're sort of dealing with things are going to take a long time systemically to progress. Do you have any sort of shots you want to call in terms of where you think this is going?
Well, I'd say these transformations, because I do believe that I know we joke about AI. I do believe we're going through a transformation of the technology and the
Oh,
technology
unquestionably.
stack
Yeah.
driven by AI. But even this AI transformation, which feels super fast, is going to take us a while. It's going to be measured in years, not months. And so I think a year from now, we'll see more adoption. Uh, we do a lot of work thinking about AI adoption trends, and
Sure.
I've written a little bit about this. So it's something I've thought quite a bit about. We're still very early in the adoption where it's mostly like me using AI or you using AI.
A
Now
lot
we're
of
starting to see this
experimenting.
thing called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generative AI, which means I'm grabbing data when I do it. I'm not just
Yeah.
depending on what it's already been trained on. I'm looking real time in inventory in my 5 distribution centers so I can make a better routing decision for the truck than
Sure.
sitting equidistant between 3 of them. Okay, so that's like a RAG use case because I got to know what's there then. Then we have the next thing, which so that's integrating with data. Then we have people starting to integrate with process, and that's called agentic AI, if you've
Yeah.
heard that term. And so that's where the AI doesn't just give information and process information, but it does process. I think the next step is we're going to see AI that does both data and process integration. And it's going to be, I call it expansive.
Okay.
Now, that expansive motion, I think, won't start for another year or two. So I think in the next year, we'll see more RAG, we'll see more agentic deployment, and we'll see a transformation of traffic
Mm.
from normal SaaS traffic and normal cloud traffic to more AI driven traffic, which will change some of the performance characteristics as well as the security risk. And that's why I think it's so important for organizations to partner with technology providers because we have to stay on top of this, and
Yeah.
you got a transportation business to run, right? And you've got to be up
Absolutely.
every day. And so part of our organization is up every day with you. Another part of our organization is thinking about what do we need to give you so that we can be up every day with you in a year or 2 years. And so I think it's going to be a little less dramatic, uh, but then it's going to sneak up on us. Right. So I think it's going to be very different. If you would have asked me 5 years from now,
Yeah.
it would be really hard question. But I think it would be my answer would be it's going to be crazy. We're not even going to
Yeah.
recognize it. A year from now, I think it's going to still be mostly incremental.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. So this report's incredibly interesting, but it's also going to be interesting to sort of stay in the loop as you release that wholesale and retail one that you talked about, because I mean, very transportation and logistics intensive businesses, right? So even though you're
Right.
getting away from that being the primary focus, there's still
That's
going to be
right.
some connectivity in terms of what they're trying to achieve. Ken, if
Yeah,
people
let's
are
chat again about that. I'd be excited. That should be,
absolutely
we should have that in probably another 3 or 4 months. So.
awesome. In the meantime, if people are meeting you for the first time, if they would like to get a hold of this report on network security and transportation and logistics, what are the best places for them to go, or how should they reach out and connect with you?
So the report is available on aryaka.com. We have an entire hub for transportation and logistics where we also have some case studies as well as some use case information, as well as this report. And then to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. As I like to say, I'm a somewhat or a very promiscuous networker on LinkedIn. So as long as you're legit, I'm going to connect with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions or love chatting about these topics, as well as cycling if you're a cyclist, or AI if you're an AI aficionado. So Ken Rutsky on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Ken, thank you so much. I do look forward to that other report. We'll link to this report in today's show notes. So, regardless of where you found this episode and conversation, take a look down below if you want to get your own copy of the report. But, Ken, thank you so much for being with me.
It was great being with you. Thanks a lot, Kelly.